Okay, we got to switch gears here. We go from Chumash to Tanya. It's a whole nother ball game. And today's Thursday, and we're discussing some deep stuff. I'm going to share with you my take on it. I didn't have. I mean, I learned it, and I'm going to admit that it's my understanding of these ideas. But let's see if we can do this together. Let's get through how some of these ideas together. So we're discussing some very deep stuff. So try to stay with me and see if we could get through this together. So we discussed in yesterday's class that we're trying to make the point that it's not possible for a human being to comprehend Hashem. And we're trying to understand God, at least to the furthest level that the human being can understand. We understand that we cannot understand him, but we could understand what it's not. And we said yesterday that whatever I'll think of, everything is from my own experiences. And the deepest level the human being can reach, which is the beginning of creation, which is the level of wisdom, relative to Hashem, it's like action. And B, it makes no sense even for us to say that Hashem has a much greater wisdom than me, because he doesn't have wisdom. Wisdom's in your world and not in Hashem's world. One of the points we made the other day, adding to this, I hope people are following me because it's building on building, and we're going to finish the chapter today, hopefully. One of the points we made was that you cannot say that Hashem has wisdom, because if Hashem were to discover something new, think of something and discover something new, that would be a novelty to God. And there's nothing new to God, because also it would mean he's not really ultimately one, because he got a new thought. So let's say I'll learn algebra. I don't know how in yeshiva, they didn't teach me algebra. I didn't make it past English in third grade. I hate to admit it. I only had to learn how to speak English and use some very good computer programs called Grammarly to teach me how to read and write English. But when I'll ask you a question like we had today about algebra and trying to figure out the circumference, square root a, I wish I would know these things. But if I would learn about them, they would it opens up a new world for me. So now I have new information. So how does it work by Hashem? So if he has a thought process and can learn new things, then, which is how a brain works, that would mean that God's not the real know everything to begin with, because he could discover something new. So we can't say that by Hashem. So Hashem can't have a brain and a whole mind the way it works. So, and then we asked the question yesterday saying, well, why do we call God wisdom or kind? And we had to try and answer that question. So one of the answer we gave in Tanya yesterday was that it's not that he has wisdom, it's that wisdom comes from him. He's the creator of wisdom, and therefore I could say Hashem's wise because Hashem created wisdom. But we're still left with a big problem. And I think that's what he's addressing in today's Tanya. How do we get from point A to point B? How do we cross that bridge? How do we get from Hashem, who's the infinite creator of the world, to the creation of the world? If Hashem is just beyond everything, how are these things created from him? So he creates wisdom, but he's not wisdom. He's deeper. He's completely different. Well, how do we go across that bridge from Hashem is not made up of wisdom, because him and wisdom are one, and whatever definition of wisdom we have, he's beyond that. It's not called wisdom. We're just using the term wisdom because he makes wisdom, or because it's words for us to even understand him, but he's just beyond that. So how do we cross that bridge, on that gap from infinite Hashem's one, just beyond anything we could understand, to him actually creating things that create our world, that could make us exist, that could start with wisdom, that can make our whole existence exist? And I'm going to share with you two examples that he's going to bring in today's Tanya, and then we'll learn the Tanya inside. So one example, he says they like to use here as an example, an analogy, to show how something could come from something else, yet be so removed from it. And what's that example? Here, so we have many parts to our bodies. Our hands are attached to us. Our fingernails are attached to us. Our limbs are attached to us, our eyes, our nose. But he says something unique and interesting to here, and maybe even nails, but specifically here, is that hair literally grows out of your body. You could see the hair grow, right? It grows very fast. You need to take a haircut every month. However, you can go to a barber and the guy will literally cut off thousands of hair and you won't feel a drop of pain. Why is that? That's a weird thing. How come you can cut somebody's hair and they won't feel any pain. If I pull a hair, I'll feel it. It'll kill you. It'll kill you. I mean, it'll hurt you. It'll hurt a lot if you pull a bunch of hairs out. Try what is it? Going for an EKG on your chest, and then by a guy who's very hairy and pulling the tape out, pulling the Band-Aid out of certain areas, it's very painful. But if someone comes with a scissor and literally just cuts the hair, it's not painful. So it's a very interesting analogy, way to help us understand what we're saying here is literally the hair comes from the body and it's painful if you pull it, but if I cut it, basically what happens is there's a gap that the hair is created by the body, but there's such a strong gap of separation that once it becomes the hair, if you cut it, the body doesn't feel the pain anymore because it came from the body, but it's so separate that it's disconnected at some point, the hair from the body. So something could create, it's just a little bit of an analogy. I'm going to give another analogy in a second, but something could create something else, and something could create something else, and yet be so separated from it. So you see the hair's coming out of the body, you see the connection there, you see the color here. This is this guy's. You can find the DNA, I think, even in the hair of the person, right? And you see the hair comes straight from the head. Yet it went through such a separation that you could cut it and the body won't feel any pain. It won't have any effect on the body. The fact that it's cut is an idea of something coming from something else, yet being totally so separate. So that's one analogy. Another analogy I want to give that he's going to share today's Tanya. Again, this is my understanding. I don't know if it's 100% right, but at least trying to make it rational to my own brain. And that is that, again, as we bring light going into a vessel, and this is a very analogy that's often used. So if light, let's say, is pure, it's not like God, it's not the ultimate purity and infinite, but let's just take light. Light is very, very pure. It's pure light. And if you take a color light bulb and you shine the light through that color light bulb, the light will be that color. You go to the store, you could buy daylight, you could buy sunlight, you could buy whatever, regular light, you could buy red light bulbs. You see some holidays, so the Havdil, some of the Goyim they have different kinds of lights, all different color lights. You can have all different kinds of color lights. The light itself is pure and unadulterated. But what happens is the light bulb takes the light and it takes the pure light and then shines it in a certain direction. So Hashem is infinite. Hashem's pure. By Hashem himself, that energy, that light, that is the ultimate purity. That is infinite God, and there is no additions to Hashem. However, Hashem then created vessels, which is in the first world of creation, the world of Atzilus. And in that world of Atzilus, that first world, Hashem will then shine his light into those vessels. Now, what are those vessels? Those vessels are God's character, wisdom, and all these names we're giving God, kind and merciful and wise. So Hashem himself is not wise, but Hashem created a vessel of wisdom, then shined his light into those vessels. So now Hashem is being reflected as wisdom. So that he could create the world. Get it? So in order for Hashem to create the world, he shined his pure infinite light into a color, into a character of wisdom, character of kindness. And now Hashem looks like he's in our world, all of a sudden, kindness and wisdom. And that's how Hashem is able, although God, how he is himself, is beyond any wisdom, any kindness. You can't call those names, he's totally infinite behind. So then how could our world exist? How could Hashem create a limited physical world? Because he created vessels that he then shines himself into those vessels, and those vessels are able to portray Hashem in that limited way that our world should be able to come into existence. Okay, I hope I'm making a little bit of sense. We could continue to discuss this. Let me read inside Tanya. We'll read the note. We don't always do the notes, but we'll do today's note. The secret, the mystical principle of Tzimtzum, of how infinite energy is contracted. Tzimtzum Adam Kamen, and the Kabbalistic word for the first original beginning of all creation is called the first man, the Adam Kadmon, whatever. Not getting into Kabbalah here for the Gesaida Dikna and the Tzimtzum of called Dikna, which is the hair, which is what the example I gave you is the hair growing, how it can grow straight from the head, but yet not be pained at all because it could be totally separate. The way the whole system works is that Hashem contracted his light by putting his light into vessels that he created that are limited, and then his light will shine through those vessels, and you'll be able to see Hashem reflected through wisdom and character and expressions of God. That after Hashem shined his light through the vessels of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, then after Hashem's infinite light puts itself into the bulb, that makes it a color, into its character, that makes it to have a limited character in our world, then we could say on God, that God is the most brilliant wisdom. He's the knower, he's the knowing, he's everything at once. Or by God knowing himself, he knows all of creations, which is a very high level beyond our level of comprehension. But it's still at least something that we could talk about God, that God's so brilliant, his oneness of being one with the knowledge. I don't want to get into all the details, we discussed this in the past. But that Hashem knows all of creation through himself. But the fact is, you're still using knowledge. So you cannot talk about God as essence. You're talking about how Hashem dressed himself up in the vessels, as Kabbalah uses the term, to portray himself through some kind of wisdom that we could call it wisdom. So first, Hashem's infinite energy goes into the vessels of the highest world of Atzilus, which will then continue to contract itself into the lower worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiya, formation, creation, and so on. But God himself, before he puts his light into the vessels, you can't use any intellect, because the whole world of intellect, it's just a different world. It's like comparing numbers and colors, like I spoke about yesterday. You just cannot compare the two. It's not in your realm. You just can't talk about it. Because it's not in any way, shape, or form knowledge, because Hashem doesn't have knowledge. It's beyond, it's infinite. He's infinitely, completely, and utterly beyond any kind of knowledge, and therefore we cannot understand Hashem how he is in his essence. Going to see that, as we said yesterday, that, and so much so that our wisdom is like by him action. In other words, it makes no sense. It's comparing apples and oranges that are not compared to each other. The bottom line is, this is how he finishes. The fact is, he says, it's not our job as Jews to try and discover America, to try and discover God. It's not our job to figure out how he operates. He didn't teach it to us. He didn't give it to us. It's not your job to sit and discover, how does God work? Let me figure out the mechanics of it. It's not what Hashem gave to us. That's what we say anyway. These Kabbalistic ideas are not for us. Hashem on purpose. They're not for the human being could sit and try to climb the ladder and figure out these things. It's not for you. What did Hashem tell us? To believe that Hashem is the ultimate oneness. The ultimate oneness. There's no pieces. There's no forms or shapes. And Hashem and his attributes, though we don't understand how he could have wisdom or characters, but he does. Doesn't matter to you how it works. The fact is that Hashem and his characters are one. Hashem is the ultimate oneness with whatever pieces of Hashem, kind of to say it's the ultimate unity, because it's not really pieces. The wisdom of Hashem and the kindness and the mercy and so on. The character of Hashem, his will, Hashem's wisdom, that we always talk about it, binasa, in God's understanding, wisdom and understanding, Vidaiti, and his knowledge. The bottom line is, you have to know, we say in Shema, Hashem is one, that God is the ultimate unity, that he's not made up of pieces. That is totally and utterly beyond the level of our comprehension, of our wisdom and intellect and comprehension. Therefore, just like you can't understand God because he's beyond you, you can't understand how could it be that God has character and that doesn't create, a division among him and separation, that he's not one unity. So you don't understand him, and you don't understand why he's really one with his character. That's where the Zohar calls it the secret of faith, because it's the belief that's beyond him. So again, just to sum up our point as we're finishing this chapter, sum up this point. Usually, if I say a human being has knowledge or emotions, it means that you're made up of pieces. You have feelings and you have emotions, and you're made up of different compartments. And sometimes you feel like this, sometimes you feel like that. It's not your one ultimate unity. By God, he's pure, infinite oneness, that he's not made up of pieces. So how could we say that God has mercy on this world, which seems to say that he is made up of pieces? He says, just like you can't understand God, you can't understand why he's one with them and can have them, and it's not a conflict to the fact that he's the ultimate oneness. And that's not our job to dig and try to discover America, try to discover how it works. Our job is to accept with faith that we cannot understand God, and we cannot understand how he operates, and we cannot understand how could it be that he treats this world with kindness and mercy, yet it doesn't affect his unity and his oneness. I want to share one more idea. Rabbi Chazal shares it's sometimes a good idea to share. Just to explain this idea, I'm going to take you a little deep over here. Maybe I could share with you. So let's say I have two of these cups, okay? The same exact cup. Well, let me first take two opposite cups. I have two different cups here. I'm going to ask you what makes them that they're not the same? Well, one thing you could say they're two different cups. One is a hot cup, one is a plastic cup, okay? When you use coffee for, one I could drink water or soda out of. Well, what happens if I'll take one cup? One cup, I take two of the same kind of cup. I have two white hot cups. I bought them in Costco. They're the same exact cups. Are they still two separate creations, or are they one? You'll tell me they're still two separate creations. But should I tell you why they're two separate creations, even though they're identical? It's because they're in a world of time and space. So this is in one, I don't know, it's in one part of the world. It's taking up 3 inches of the world here. And the next cup, if I had it here, would be taking up 3 inches of somewhere else. And therefore, they're two separate cups, even though they're identical. But let's now go out of the physical world. Okay, hopefully you're following me. If in other words, out of the world of space, and I have two identical things, are they really two, or are they one? Because the only reason that this cup and the identical cup is two, it's because in space they're in two different spaces. But let's say there wouldn't be space, and there would only be, then they wouldn't be two cups. They would only be one cup because they're in the same place. So what differentiates them? There is no difference between them because the two cups are really one. So when we get to, you don't usually think like this because you're not in that world of space. So let's talk about angels. Angels don't actually take up a physical space. So what would be the difference between one angel and another? Oh, maybe they have different character. They're in the world of character. But what happens if the two angels would be the same exact character? Then they wouldn't be two angels because there is no space to differentiate between the two of them. They would only be one angel because there's no difference to their character. It would be one angel because in that world there's no space. So what differentiates them? If there's no real difference to them, they're identical. Then they're not really two. They're really going to be one. And therefore, you understand what I'm saying? So now let's talk about Hashem's oneness. So Hashem is beyond time. So I can't even differentiate between today and tomorrow. I can't say one's here and one's in this date and one's in the next date. One's on May 6th and one's on May 7th because there's no time. I'm beyond space because there is no difference between space in that dimension. So you understand where I'm going? So then there's really ultimate oneness. There's really no difference. Maybe character would make a difference. Good. So in the world, which I could make differences, at least in character, in motions, in a thought, I could have differences. So that's in that world. If God were to have different emotions, then it would mean that there's particulars and there's nuances and differences, and that could cause differences in whatever dimension that God's in. But what we're trying to say is that God is the ultimate oneness. There is no other character. God is the ultimate oneness, and therefore there's just one, and there's nothing else in the world that he's in. As the world starts to be created in the level of wisdom, at least, ideas is where things separate from each other, even beyond the physical world of time and place. I hope that makes sense to some of you. These are some deep ideas in Chassidus that we could ponder about. But as Tanya ended up saying, is that Hashem is the ultimate oneness. There is no, we don't understand how could it be that the ultimate oneness could then treat the world with kindness and so on. How does that not cause friction and diversity among Hashem? If he's the ultimate oneness. But he said, just like we don't understand God, we don't understand why he could be one at the same time. Right? Going back to our question, as people often ask, if God knows what's going to happen, how could it force me to do it? Because you're all talking within your understanding of thought within your own world. He doesn't think with the way you think, and therefore it's not a question in his world. Anyway, that is that's the Tanya. Any questions or comments on today?